What started out as a potentially heated political panel on C-SPAN last year has morphed into a budding working relationship between two veterans' rights groups, historically on two opposite ends of the political spectrum. Joining us now, Director at Concerned Veterans for America, Dan Caldwell, and Chairman at Vote Vets, John Soltz. They are both veterans of the Iraq War. John, I'll start with you. I guess first set the stage for our viewers. What set you both apart, and then what issue brought you both together?
Well, you've got all these veterans groups in the United States that claim they're nonpartisan. They really sit in the middle. And Dan's organization, Concerned Veterans, and my organization, Vote Vets, we're very political. We spend millions of dollars in political campaigns across this country. Just last cycle, probably traded artillery of $5 million against each other in the Wisconsin Senate race. So there's the politics piece of it, and then there's the issues. Very much against and fought each other on issues of privatization of the VA. Dan calls it choice. We call it privatization. Really went to battle on some of those issues. We're very progressive, they're very conservative, but we found some unity around this issue on Forever Wars, working together on the Yemen campaign, things like Amendment 4 in Florida, allowing felons to vote, and we got to talking about, working together to try to end or repeal the 2001 AUMF in Afghanistan, which is a very big target for a lot of organizations out there.
When Americans
So Dan, how's this work, Dan?
Well, again, we are two organizations, as John pointed out, who have traded a lot of fire over the years on the policy front, on the political front. But as a result of that, we've built up a lot of credibility with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. John mainly on the left, us on the right. So what we're going to do is over the next couple of years, we're going to leverage those relationships to ultimately advance this shared vision for a better American foreign policy, which involves more restrained use of military force, and ultimately examine why we are in these endless wars and get to a better place with our foreign policy.
Let me raise the question about endless wars to you both. We've had endless American troop deployments since World War II. In Europe, in Korea. So it seems to me there's nothing wrong with open-ended troop deployments. So what is it you're against? If the United States stays in Afghanistan or we stay in Syria open-endedly, small numbers, and it achieves a goal, that could be seen as a forever war. On the other hand, again, we've been in Korea for 70 years. We've been in Germany for 70 years. So what is it you're against here?
We're
exactly?
against the abuse of the Constitution of the United States. 90% of Congress has not voted on the 2001 AUMF. And you guys are going to, I don't know if it's going to be this year or next year, the year after, but you're going to see a kid killed in Afghanistan that was born after the towers came down in New York City. So we are for the Constitution of the United States. And the fact is 90% of Congress hasn't voted in this war. And not only did President Obama, but President Trump also has used that 2001 AUMF to engage organizations in Africa that did not exist on 9/11. Our military is spread way out all over the world, and it's time for Congress to do their job and have a conversation again. If Congress wants to vote to reauthorize certain operations throughout the world, we can have that conversation, but it's negligent of Congress to avoid this conversation for 18 years.
Guys, follow up. So is your concern procedural or is it policy?
Both.
If Congress votes and says we ought to have an open-ended commitment, for argument's sake, in Afghanistan of 5,000 troops, are you against that on policy grounds once Congress makes such a vote?
Our organization is Vote Vets, yes, absolutely. But the first phase of this is to have the conversation. The second phase of it is to have the debate, which obviously look, President Obama put 120,000 troops in Afghanistan. There was absolutely no payoff. I'm not sure what 5,000 more is going to do. And in the end, people have to figure out where you sit is where you stand. And we stand with the American soldier who has to go 3 times.
Okay, Dan, John just referenced the AUMF. It hasn't been voted on in nearly 20 years now. But let me ask you, the both of you actually, but you first, Dan. In looking at this issue and opening up our military engagements around the world, you would inevitably have to get into the fact that we have special forces, special operations troops in Latin America, South America, Africa, all over the world. Are you prepared to put everything on the table in terms of what we're trying to achieve here?
Well, most of those forces are actually not operating under the 2001 AUMF. Some aren't. They're operating under Title 10, or in some cases, if they're working with the CIA, they're operating under Title 50. So if you have this debate in public, doesn't mean that you have to expose confidential or secret operations and endanger those operations over time. What we're mainly focused on is these large-scale deployments in places like Afghanistan, like Syria, which, going back to the earlier point that I think Richard made about, deployments in Germany and South Korea, which, to be honest, we think should also be examined as well, too. These are fundamentally different in that these are combat deployments. And in many cases, especially in Afghanistan, there's not a clear end state. There's not a clear goal. We're just kind of muddling along. And I think it's just fundamentally wrong to ask American troops, American Marine soldiers, airmen, sailors to put their lives on a line in a conflict that there's not a clear goal or a clear end state.
So, John, Dan brought up Syria. I'm curious what your thoughts are when it comes to Syria. Obviously, the goal in taking 2,500 to 4,000 troops over there was to stop the spread of Russia's influence, Iran's influence, Assad's influence through parts of that region. Does your organization oppose troops in Syria with those stated goals?
You don't have to go to a fancy university in the United States. All you have to do is serve a year in Iraq and you'll learn what's going on in Syria. First, Syria occurred because we invaded Iraq, and I was an embedded advisor on the border in 2011, and it was no surprise that Syrian insurgents are coming over the border and killing the Iraqi army. There's two wars being waged simultaneously against U.S. forces in the Middle East. There's the war against the West and the jihadism that we see every day, and then there's the war against each other, the Saudi, UAE-backed states fighting the Iranian-backed states. And so these folks are fighting together. We have opposed U.S. intervention in Syria, and we could support the president if he would do it in a fundamentally correct way that doesn't abandon the Kurds to get out. We would like to see, this is not a congressionally mandated operation in Syria. So, no, we don't support it.
Joe,
Dan,
I just like to make...
Dan, let me just say really quickly, there would be many people in the Pentagon and some people that fought there that said America's withdrawal from Iraq in 2011 actually created conditions and a power vacuum that actually led to the suffering in Syria.
Well, Joe, I'd just like to go back and address a point you make about Iranian and Russian influence in Syria. The Russians and Iranians have been the dominant powers in Syria since, in Iran's case, since 1979, the Iranian Revolution, the Russians since 1950s. It wouldn't fundamentally alter the balance of power in the region if the Russians and Iranians remain the dominant power in Syria. In regards to, the withdrawal from Iraq in 2011 leading to the situation in Syria, I think you need to go back to the point that John made, is that ultimately we wouldn't have these problems if we wouldn't have made that original intervention. Now, I understand we have to take the world as it is right now, but the reality is that Syria now is much different than Iraq in 2011. Again, you have the Russians there, you have the Iranians there, you have a lot of different regional powers that have an interest in ensuring now that what happened in Iraq in 2011 doesn't happen in Syria. So I think it's a fundamentally different situation. I don't think it's an accurate comparison.
Dan Caldwell, John Soltz, thank you both for being on the show this morning.
Thank you, guys.
Best of luck.
This is something, obviously, that Richard Haass and the entire table could have a discussion about for an hour, actually. And David Ignatius, who actually has been over reporting in Syria.
We should do it.
And so many people fear that America completely abandoning Syria could lead to really some of the same crises that we saw after we left Iraq.
And still ahead.
But there's no doubt, no easy choices. And I agree with both gentlemen that constitutionally, Congress needs to start authorizing. If they want to be constitutionally consistent, they need to start constitutionally authorizing these military wars.
Still ahead, among the president's Twitter targets over the weekend, a rerun of SNL. So-called fake news media, and certain Fox News anchors that didn't completely go his way. We'll discuss this unprecedented attack on the free press.
He's now attacking Fox.
Unprecedented behavior.
Now attacking Fox.
His condition is getting worse. And be sure to catch Hardball tonight at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time right here on MSNBC. Chris Matthews will have an exclusive interview with Senator and 2020 candidate Cory Booker. Morning Joe will be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.